joy of now closing this afternoon, where we tried to state out where fashion is at this moment. And I would say, Mujaneta, listening to your talk earlier on with Lisa Lang, I would even enlarge this afternoon to that talk. And I would start maybe when we now reconsider what we heard this afternoon and what we can discuss now with the opening remarks that you and Lisa had early this afternoon, discussing about the EU legislative aspects and where fashion industry needs to go to until 2026 and beyond. And having that in mind, what will come as a legislative aspect towards all of us working in that fashion industry, exactly meaning the Digital Product Pass, das Deutsche Lieferkettengesetz. And having that in mind, having now a closing round that's called a critical disclosure, and looking exactly on how circular economy and circular economic solutions can play an important role in making our industry future-proof.
Yes, hello everybody. Like Alex said, I'm Mujaneta Tinapel, and I'm excited to be moderating this panel right here. Earlier, I don't know if you guys were here, I was talking to Lisa Lang, and she presented for us the problems that are going on with the industry and how legislation is going to play a really key role. So what's exciting is that the people on the panel here are the solution providers. So hopefully they'll be able to give you the kind of information that will help you tackle the problems that the industry is facing currently.
Okay, let me introduce you quickly to who is with us here, because we are running out of time a little bit, so I will rush through that now. Guy Boyle, Belgian name, it's difficult for me. You're a manager of the EU research manager EU research of Sisutak. Maybe you can introduce us later to that. That is a project which is sponsored by the European Union's Horizon Europe program, and that's focusing on research and on innovation for the fashion industry, right? Then we have Mario Malzacher. You're a co-founder of Circular Fashion and Circular ID, and you're working closely together with Brussels as well on bringing solutions to the market. Circular fashion is quite well known, I think, to our industry through winning the H&M's Global Change Award in 2019, and is now pushing out not only pilots but really solutions for circular fashion for the market. Trisha, you're Trisha Carey here for the first time in your new role as being CCO for Renewcell, another super interesting startup coming from Scandinavia and being in that ecosystem as well. And I'd love to hear, or we'd love to hear your perspectives on what the global brands will look for in the future from your perspective, not only from your company's perspective, but as well from you as a professional working in that industry and having circular fibers ready for the market for years now. David, no need for any introduction. You're a publisher and trend researcher of new publications, and it's cool to have you on stage again. Mateusz Wielopolski, you're Chief Circular Economic Officer and co-founder of Circulix, a software company that is automating data in order to measure and design. And Mujaneta, we decided that in order to keep this looking on our watches, a lively conversation. We'd love to have some chaos on stage. We love you to interrupt each other. We love you to dispute if there is any dispute on where this fashion, our beautiful fashion industry shall go in the future. But before we start the chaos, Mario, maybe you can give us an overview of where the status quo of fashion is from a circularity perspective in the January of 2023.
Yeah, I tried to do that, and I would like to do that at an example of that. Actually, I met my co-founder at the Munich Fabric Start 6 years ago in 2016. And back then in 2016, 2017, the fashion industry was a very linear industry. I think it was in 2017 when the Ellen MacArthur Foundation published this number that actually less than 1% of all materials used for textiles are recycled to new textiles after use. Now, where are we 7 years later, or 6 years later? Back then, the main problem were, on the one hand, there was little to no knowledge about circular design on producer side. There was very little awareness on consumer side, how to prolong the use of garments. Instead, we had reduction of wearing garments, also accelerated by fast fashion. Then we had very little information on sorting side, what is in the product, so that they could sort for reuse, but also for recycling. And the recycling side was also not so elaborated back then. We had mechanical recycling. We had some chemical recyclers. Renewcell was already there, but only with a demonstration plant back then. And so we didn't have capacity for fiber-to-fiber recycling. So now, 6 years later, what has happened? I would like to start with recycling, because I think recycling is driving a lot of the other layers. And on the recycling side, we see that we have a lot of progress. So for example, one is sitting next to me, Renewcell. They have built now a scaled plant with a capacity of 60,000 tons. And this is not only for Renewcell the case, that's also the case for other recycling companies. They are going from lab to demonstrating, and they're going from demonstrating to scale. So we definitely have a better situation there now than 6 years ago. Then recycling feedstock requirements are driving circular design. On circular design side, we see back then we had commitments like from the Global Fashion Agenda, the 2020 commitment, where 12% of the industry committed. 1/3 of these goals has been achieved, for example, by circular design trainings, where we as Circular Fashion did a majority of these trainings with brands. But we also noticed as Circular Fashion that if we really want to scale circular design, we need criteria which can be used from everyone. So we developed circular design criteria, and these criteria are adapted already from very important players in the meantime. So for example, H&M integrated these criteria into their design principles. Hugo Boss did that. Zalando did that. Zalando even announced now that they want to take this as a basis for all the brands selling through Zalando, which is more than 5,000 brands. So we definitely see change there happening. Still, I see that with the ESPR coming from the EU side, we can have an even bigger scale in the future. I see that we have more solutions on post-industrial waste. So for example, Reverse Resources has built a platform how you can deal with your waste, which is more and more evolving. And what was the last point? I see that we also starting to create standards in that area, but that's coming. In the use phase, I see that we have much more reuse platforms today. We have now Vinted, we have Sellpy, we have Momox, we have Zalando, About You. They all have second-hand platforms now, so we have much better tools to get them circulate. Then we see more and more players which are active in the field of refurbishing products, repairing them, preparing them from upcycling them, so like the renewal workshop. So there's a lot happening on that side as well. And we see that brands are starting to engage with their customer also after the point of sale by using digital product passport tools like the Circularity ID and others, where consumers can see how they can prolong the use phase. They show them strategies there, but also showing them what are take-back channels which are prepared for recycling, which are prepared for e-commerce. Last step, if we go into the reverse supply chain, back then we only had manual sorting. So a person was looking at the garment, taking a decision in 4 seconds for reuse or recycling. Also for recycling, they basically felt, is it more or less polyester, more or less cotton, and then they gave it to a mechanical recycler which made, let's say, filling material for car seats for it. We definitely see a change on that stage as well. We have on the one hand spectroscopy, like fiber sort, which helps to sort for also chemical recycling. And we also see from ourselves intelligent sorting stations, which can sort based on IDs, RFIDs integrated, where also some sorters already using this. Last thing is that we also see the third approach in sorting is AI-based, so computer vision, taking pictures and automate sorting. That's now in prototype stage, but that can help in the future as well. To summarize, I think we have done a lot of groundwork in the recent years. We don't see it that much in numbers yet. We are still too small. We are not scaled enough. It's too slow, definitely. But I see that the groundwork is here and that we can scale this in the next years. Definitely legislation will be needed to overcome some cost hurdles. And we will need, obviously, also a lot of investment in the next years. But the technology, I would say 80% of technology is there. Now we have to scale it. And I think then we can really do a change in the next 5 to 10 years.
Mario, thank you very much for that helicopter overview. I think it was brilliant to keep the conversation going or to keep it started. And before, maybe in order to pick up your last points and to learn more about the obstacles that are in the room, maybe hand over to Guy, because you're exactly focusing with your work on what are the bottlenecks and what are the obstacles in order to scale solutions for a more circular fashion economy. And I would love to maybe you to point out where the other frames, like not only the wins that we already have, but what keeps us already or still slows us down.
I think I fully agree with the fact that most of the technology, or at least the majority, let's say, is developed, but it works, let's say, often in more ideal conditions. And I think that is one of the big challenges, because in the end, it works maybe for one type of waste. And I think you probably will agree that the input material that you get is really crucial. And I think that's an important next step for these technologies, is to see how can we become more robust, how can we deal with a larger variety of input material. I think that's really one key. The other is definitely the scale. On what kind of scale does it become profitable? But maybe first at the scale, I think most of these technologies will require quite heavy investments. And if you take the typical textile producers, they don't have this capacity often. In Europe, they're all fighting. Last years, they're definitely not flourishing. So then to take a risk and to take this investment, I think, is difficult. So for the scale. And the other part is, as long as the virgin material remains available at these prices, I think it will be very hard. But maybe that's a logical step then to you afterwards.
Trisha, where's the capacity coming from?
I think it's really, it's because if you look, maybe before going, I think in the past there actually is already for years and years quite some recycling going on. Maybe not from textile to, or let's say from clothing to clothing, but a lot of recycling happens where it makes economic profit. If you take more technical fibers, a carbon fiber, nobody will throw that away, but recycle it, and that's in place. Also other technical fibers, that's in place because it makes economic sense. And I think that's still the challenge for the common fibers like a polyester and a cotton.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on your price comments, especially right now. Fiber prices are really at all-time lows and coming off a very volatile time period too. So how do we introduce new materials and bring in circularity that is going to be at a price that is scalable? I think your summary was excellent in covering everything. We're not doing enough. We have to do more. There's a bit of chaos that we're getting over too. It's everybody's going around and there's so many factors coming in, because we're not just taking a linear supply chain and turning it into a circle. We're doing something that's much harder to do. And wherever you can have plug and play solutions, I think that's really the best option to have the scaling and to have it fast. But the regulation will happen and there will not be enough materials to satisfy all the goals. I'd love for someone to take all the retailers and brands and their goals and really start to equate what volumes, maybe that's something you could work on, what volumes are needed to really satisfy all of that, because there won't be enough. And then I think we'll see a whole other situation around price. But kind of just jumping in on that.
I would love to jump in. I think in terms of pricing, I think right now we are competing with virgin fibers, but I see that extended producer responsibility is coming, and it's quite likely that we will have minimum recycled fiber content in that legislation. So in that moment, let's say you would say minimum 5%, minimum 10% recycled fiber in each product. You're not competing with virgin fiber anymore, and I think that's perfect ground to also do investments in that side.
Right. You almost have to separate it, right? It can't be still that same comparison. And that's really how we look at it too at RenewCell, is that the pulp that we're producing, which is from 100% textile waste, is not necessarily a comparison to the traditional dissolving wood pulp. It's completely different. There's no one else out there that has 100% recycled content in their pulp. So I think this is where people have to think differently. Even the whole circular business model, and how in a linear model you had, this increase of who is getting the margin, with the retailer and the brand getting the most, that can't exist the same way anymore. And I think there needs to be more discussion around this as you have more players coming in, collectors, sorters, pre-processors, processors. You have to look at that model differently. So I think there's still work that needs to be done on this, just related to the price side of it. But I think overall, when regulation comes in, and I think the new EU updates are coming in March. There's another round, I believe, in March of further updates.
I don't know when the next, if someone in the round knows it.
Yeah, March should be.
Is it March?
Yeah, but if I may jump in here, I think that's one of the key factors is kind of the lack of standards and regulations also hindering investments, and that's why we have this chaos, that there's a lot of players, a lot of startups in the innovating sector, but since we still don't know what's going to be the exact regulations, when are they coming, investment is also being held back, and that's kind of also causing the chaos. And especially for these innovators, they need to an ecosystem where they can partner up also with the big players, because they are not able to scale up the innovations in an isolated space as they're working on them now.
I wanted to, I think what you're saying is super on point, but I want to bring the elephant that's in the room that no one's touched on yet, because I've been listening very hard to all of you. Overproduction. Can we truly be circular if we're not dealing with that problem? Because I'm sure, as most of you know, the fashion industry is well known for burning its stock. It orders more than what it needs. I mean, can we not kind of figure that out first? Is that possible?
I think from a viewpoint of material circularity, it is one of the easiest things to tackle, because in principle you perfectly know what has been produced, because it's also material that has not been soiled, is not contaminated, it has not been washed, let's say 50 cycles. So from a pure circularity viewpoint of taking back the material and reusing it, it's definitely something that one can tackle.
So it helps
if you should reduce the production.
Companies to keep on with overproducing.
Sorry?
So it helps companies to go on overproducing.
No. I mean, of course, you should try to minimize, but once it is there, I think it's indeed completely insane to burn, because if you see how much effort is sometimes done to recycle material, to get some streams that you know what is there, to decontaminate or to make sure it's sufficiently pure and with certain materials, I think then it's. I heard the word from Lisa, so I will use it again, insane, that something like that would still be burned. But
my point is that if you know how to deal with overproduction, because it's truly circular, isn't that an incentive for a company to overproduce even more, because then it's still something that they can reuse? It's not overproduction anymore. It's just.
I think there will always be an economic loss on it, huh? It might be, let's say, from a moral viewpoint that you can reuse the materials, but I think from an economical viewpoint, you will always lose on it if you don't sell it and you have to recycle it.
David, from an economical viewpoint, is there another room?
I'm very honored to be here with all these learned people, and they are learned people, RenewCell and all the rest of it. But I'm sorry, this whole story has to be rewritten. We are suffering from sustainability fatigue. It's the wrong word. We have to get out of this whole concept and rewrite it. What we're doing, what you're doing, is brilliant, but it's not going fast enough. Renewcell is limited in the amount of cotton it can use and make. McKinsey says we need to spend $8 billion to get an industry up by 2030 who can actually make 18% recycled fabrics. Recycling, what does it mean? A little bit of the quality is recycled, not the whole lot. So first of all, let's understand we're in a business and we're here to make money. So how do we make money in a reduced society where consumers are buying vintage, secondhand, resale, all the rest of it, and we are concentrating on it? We reduce, we get rid of our product line, we take out 5 or 6 things and we reduce quantities, so we reduce the waste, because most of my money is going out the window in sales, 78% markdown, 30% markdowns. This is really, really bad. Then I tell the story from money. How do I make money out of being a responsible manufacturer? And I make money by losing less money in waste, understanding that changing my whole production system by using new gas cylinders, different types of water, reduces my cost. And in the end, I understand that money is made by being sustainable because the public wants me to be sustainable, so I'm making money. And then we have to change the story for the consumer, because consumer is bored. They don't understand what this is all about. They don't understand what is recycling, what it's all about. We need to tell a story where they can see a future. We did brilliantly on climate change, all that fighting in the streets, all those demonstrations. Greta and everybody brought climate change to a story. Now we need a new story where you tell this is what life is. We don't understand what it means. How will life be without less? Changing all our concepts of living. You know, we're only part of it. And for God's sake, please get rid of the confusion. I couldn't agree with you more. Please legislate, bring me in digital passports as soon as you can, or PEF systems. I don't want any more circularity people giving me certificates and all different labels. I don't understand a piece of it. So, new story, please. Don't use the word sustainability because it takes too long. What everybody's doing is brilliant, and you know, we all be smashers of fashion people. We're the dirtiest, but we've done a lot of things since 2009, the first COP. You know, we're not such bad people after all. So a little bit of praise, a little bit of positivity, and help people understand because I just want to say one thing. They did this competition, right? They did this whole survey of the public in Europe. And they asked about it, what do you think about climate? Oh my God, it's awful. Yes, 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 yes. Then they said, who's responsible? Oh, the government, not me. I take my paper to the paper bag, I recycle my polyester bottles. Do you know how many people were interested in really changing their lives? Into turning into vegans, into giving up the flying and all the rest? Who were the worst countries? The most selfish, unprepared? Germany and Holland. And who were the best? Poland and Singapore.
Good, thanks that I'm Polish originally. I just wanted to add to this. I think there are also examples, like especially if we look at fashion products, which are consumer products. These are products which don't actually consume a lot of resources during their lifetime. And there are so many examples where studies have shown that shifting more to like product service-based business models can not only reduce the emissions but actually make money in the end. Yeah, they save. There are multiple ways on saving this. So, like talking about like the big elephant in the room, I think one of the first steps could be looking into these kind of examples and then making a story around it also to promote them, because there is a lot of these innovations that we just touched upon, but if you talk to a lot of players, they're not aware what's the status of innovation, what technologies are available, like even what is possible.
Yeah.
See, I think the problem is sustainability equals losing money. So to many fashion companies, the idea of being sustainable is not profit making. And I think that we need to change that conversation, like what David said. You know, it can be profitable. It's just you got to do it right.
I know companies that do it.
Yeah, because we focus always on environmental benefits when we talked about circular economy. The first motivation was environmental benefits, and never considered the word economy in this, which also drives resilience, better supply chains. And I think this is the next part of the story.
but fully agree that materials only play a small part in the whole effect of what fashion does. But that happens the part that, let's say, we're working on. So we can only do our best in the material part. And I do hope, and I also believe there is a lot of different models possible. One of the things that I think also makes really sense is to look into the social economy when it comes, for example, to deal for the moment with the end-of-life textiles. Because, again, from cost-wise and traditionally, they are the ones doing that. They collect, they select what can be resold, they select what can be repaired, they select what goes to recycling. So there's a lot to gain also there. Fully agree with that. And I think you can come up with different business models, and there are quite some pioneers who do that very well. And if it doesn't go fast enough, well, that I can't help from the material side.
How can we encourage businesses to take action? So I think we focus a lot on the problem, but maybe we're not offering solutions. I mean, what do you think?
The only way to do it is through the power of the buying dollar. It's the consumer who is going to force the pace. And unless you educate the consumer properly, because we are totally idiots. There was a quiz in the New York Times telling you, do you think you're sustainable? And everybody said, yes, using less heating is very sustainable. It's not at all sustainable. It doesn't help the problem at all. Sharing a car, no, doesn't do anything. People get all the wrong things, the wrong understanding of what is really, what are the real positive things you can do to change the thing. And that's because we are all talking together, we're all being clever together, we're all greenwashing and all the rest of it because we're not following the consumer needs to be educated, and through them and government action and Brussels, the problem is solved. The most important thing that happened in sustainability in the last 6 months is Stella McCartney's statement. At her last show in Paris, she said, I do not want to be seen as a sustainable company. I want to be seen as a designer who makes glamorous, beautiful clothes. And she understood that the concept of worthy doesn't work anymore. That's a word that's not useful anymore. We need to be desirable, desirable. And how do you become desirable? You create the power to want to be. Love. I would love sustainability, not because it's good for me.
So who's responsible for educating the consumer, would you say? Who's responsible, David, for educating the consumer? Retailer, he said.
I would like to disagree here, actually. There are studies which show why are brands actually changing to more sustainable practices. And these studies show the main driver is not the consumer or consumer demand. The main driver are the employees of the company, that they ask from their employer that they want to work in a company which is more sustainable. And I actually do that experience because we as Circular Fashion, we have never done cold calling in the whole history of our company. But all of the brands working with us reached out to us, and I see that those people reaching out to us, they are often coming in the beginning from the CSR department, but then it's spreading into the whole company, and it's coming from their own motivation that they want to do better. And I think that we don't need to tell brands that they should make money. That's a given thing in our system. We are living and we are working. I think we need to show them solutions how we can do sustainability in a efficient way that they can actually save money. So if I'm coming back to your example of overproduction, there's two ways how you can deal with overproduction. On the one hand, you can have production on demand, which I know that many brands are investing a lot of money in this because they see the potential. They're losing money with overproduction, so that would help. On the other side, you can think about solutions, how you deal with overproduction, that you don't recycle or you don't incinerate it. And there, we are looking into solutions, how we can deal with garments and find the market where these garments are still demanded. So I think it's all about giving them solutions which are economically feasible. And for me, that's the way to go, combined with mandatory legislation so that we have a level playing field between the industry stakeholders. I think that's the way to go from my perspective.
Mario and David, we had this discussion early on, David, saying, well, there's a need or a lack for a new narrative for investing in sustainability for a brand or for any corporate, because in the early days of sustainability, as far as I see it, a brand or a corporate decided to invest in sustainability because this investment would be transformed into something non-monetarizable, which is image, and that image then is transformed back through buying decisions and becoming a KPI again. But these days are somehow over, because now our industry is completely under pressure. We don't have the ability any longer to invest or to make long-term investments. We need to invest in short terms, and these investments need to be profitable in short terms. So I think there's this other maybe white elephant in the room, which is how can these investments in sustainability made profitable? And that's about pricing, Trisha. I hope that you were picking up the microphone exactly to say that. Is there some light on the horizon that investing in more sustainable production issues could become a more profitable investment in the near future as well?
It's definitely more profitable, and there's so much risk involved if you don't, or if retailers and brands don't, or even through the whole supply network they don't. And with policy, it will level up everyone so that playing field is there. And in the end, the consumer will not have a choice, right? The consumer, then all that they will be able to find will meet those standards and criteria. But I think, it's always this chicken and the egg, right? How do people start first, and where do they go? I like to think what we've done at RenewCell is kind of crack the egg, and we're just going forward. We're focusing on a niche. We are scaling quickly and taking our 60,000 tons, moving that up to 120,000 tons, and really trying to bring the market forward, and making sure that demand is there, and between the retailers and brands, and really driving that through the supply chain. But I think it's only coming. We have these solutions, bringing them forward, getting started on that. It's riding the bicycle, right? Just getting those pedals moving, and then that will ultimately get prices down. The problem is the short-term view is so bad, right? Fiber prices are down, energy costs, war in Ukraine, you name it. There's a lot of really bad factors that are all crashing together. But the long term is where people really need to look at this. And that's where they need to look at the long-term solutions that will exist in the market.
David, even so, you said we should focus on microtrends rather than macrotrends.
I have a question for the audience. Who here is under 30? Come on. Don't be shy. Can you explain to me, because I'm an idiot, why Greta and Generation Z is so loud on climate change and sustainability? I'm not allowed to do that. Responsible production, but you all go shopping at Shein. Can you explain that consumer opposites? No.
But do you have any questions? Maybe that's a good point to open up the auditorium.
I think Shein's under 20.
If there are any questions from the auditorium to the panelists, Diederich.
Peter, what is your answer to this? How they should consume? David, how should they consume?
They should consume in a mixture. So what they're already doing, resale, vintage, which will never go away, is going to grow and grow and grow. There's a huge market still left, a lot of clothes and a lot of stock to it. Then by mixing. So what you're going to do is, that's why they buy accessories and the rest of it. So they are buying in a combination of resale and new, but not 100% new. The other problem is responsible in terms of how they understand what they're buying. I don't think they understand what they're buying. I really don't. I think it's it goes back to education.
I've once seen or heard from a study which a big brand, a global brand, made with their customers, and they asked if they actually understand what kind of label is on the garment. And the result was the consumer had no idea. It was always the same effect. It didn't matter if it was a very high value label or very low barriers. It was always the same, and that's a problem. But I think for this we need legislation and minimum requirements.
Mateusz, maybe in the meantime, How important is data? Just one question in between before you come out. How important is data and how important is this information and make it accessible?
Yeah, I think it's what Mario just said. It's not going to work if the consumer doesn't understand what's on the label. I think what data will help, and this is what, especially now, these high raw material prices are driving, that companies now start to talk to each other, also stakeholders within the value chain, and start to communicate with each other. And they're opening up, that's at least from my experience, to be much more cooperative friendly. So they're looking for cooperations where they can increase their resilience through innovation, and to make this efficient and to trust each other. They need the data, and they need to have solutions which help them to identify, okay, what is now the best strategy to move forward, which materials should I use, and how do I find them based on a decision which is transparent, and this is only possible with data.
Do you think it's to do that the language of the consumer versus the language of the business is different? So they're both speaking two different languages, and therefore, when you approach a consumer and you say, what is this made out of? And they look at the label and it looks like a foreign language, so therefore they don't understand it. So how can we make it so we're all speaking the same language?
When you get digital passports or PEF systems, the thing is very simple. It is branded as good and responsible product by a government, not a greenwashing private company. Simple as that.
And actually, the digital product passport is supposed to come in 2026. I'm part of the consortium developing the prototype of the digital product passport for the EU. I know from certain people who are in charge that they are going in the direction of having a A to G score, similar like it from electric consumer products like your fridge. It will be a challenge to bring this together into one because there's so many different aspects, but they will find a way to do it. I see that the digital product passport also has the responsibility to make sure that data is available. Today it's just, for many brands, it's not available, and we will see that probably the big ones will need to start. So they need to get traceability system in place so that they have the data, and probably then the small ones need to follow.
Yeah, we're also lying, because if you say something is recycled, I want to know how much of that product is recycled. The consumer just, I'm buying recycled,
David, you stop it now.
Give her a chance.
Here's one question. It's totally fine. I just actually want to agree with David and Mario, but also one thing is definitely the digital pass, but it's still a lot about education. I mean, even within, and I'm not gonna say where I'm gonna work, but even in our company, when I speak about certification, audits, and information and Ökotex, even the designers have the big question mark. And if people who work with it don't understand how the consumer, so I totally think it's a cooperation of government, definitely, and consumers should have more responsibility as well. And I think that we not manage to teach young people and consumer in school and university. It should be actually a subject. What is sustainable? What is textile happening? Because it is a fact. Textile is the biggest polluter on the earth, with other areas as well. But I think it's a big thing, because I just recently actually saw a documentation, and still people don't, even denim, they don't know how much water is used for one denim. So people buying the jeans for $10 at H&M and not aware how much wasted that is. So I
Before
think
answering,
it's all
maybe
about
we can collect
teaching,
and we can...
teaching.
Hello, I would like to be the devil's advocate here, but I think we should also go back to basics. If I'm just going to give an example now, these water bottles, I've heard recently, correct me if I'm wrong, to recycle even glasses as, energy needs as much as polyester. We live in Germany, and Germany tap water is one of the waters you can just drink from as tap water. So I drink tap water, but here, even in this panel, we have water in the bottles. Why can't we just also start from, set examples? We can just use tap water. I mean, it's just going back to basics, because I think there's so much pressure on textile industry, but then we use plastic bottles to turn them into garments, and then we call them all sustainable polyester. So I think, it's not only
Let me
textiles.
collect the last quote from the auditorium. Maybe we have another microphone.
Yeah, probably one
Jana?
last thought or comment. I don't know. You talked about overproduction. There's, I think, a very easy solution on overproduction. You can simply prohibit overproduction. I mean, we can, in the European Union, prohibit many things like hazardous chemicals or anything. Or you can raise taxes on it. Spain just released a tax on single-use plastics. So if you bring single-use plastics on the Spanish market, you simply have to pay for it. It's a tax. And you could do the same on, overproduction too many textiles. And this is something which will come up in the European Union. And I would rather focus on that, what is coming up with legislation, because this is really changing things much more if you make people pay for that than thinking about consumer and consumer behavior, because in the end, they are not interested in hazardous chemicals or in overproduction. You really have to think about legislation and go that road.
Before closing that now, and if you stay some more minutes without that would be great, but Mario, I think, looking on my watch, it's 7:30 now. I think we have to leave you off the panel, or have you another few minutes? 1:45. Okay, then we have another 5 minutes to close this before taking you to the champagne, David. And all of you as well, if you want to join us with a party over here.
I want to just make a comment on the lady mentioned
we had a comment.
Question, okay.
I want to just come back on the impact from the textiles. I think there is just good to know that if you look at the general consumer behavior, the biggest impact we have is from our living, then transport, then food, and then textiles. So just to put, it's definitely an important one, but I think we should also look, if it's about sustainability of living, to these other three who have a more impact than our textiles and fashion. Sorry?
Food is much worse than textiles.
Yeah?
But what do you guys think about she mentioned tax. What do you know how like alcohol's taxed and cigarettes are taxed? Should we tax fast fashion in order to kind of get them to comply?
Or should we incentivize better produced fashion? Maybe turn it the other way around as well, Janita. I mean, there's true pricing and stuff. We do have these discussions for years and years. If we can incentivize better produced products on an EU level, maybe.
I think the aspect of taxes only work if it's, let's say, sufficiently smart and selective, because otherwise it's just a kind of reshoveling the problem, because in the end, if you tax it, then the money has to come from somewhere else, or people buy anyhow I think in itself, doing everything doesn't work. I mean,
hello? Yeah, only taxing won't work. It won't work if you don't provide actually a framework or an infrastructure, standard or legislative infrastructure that will actually promote system-wide large system changes. So just putting one tax on one aspect is not going to solve. So you have to really look at it in a much more holistic way. And I think this is what's going right.
One point. I don't know if you have spoken about. I came a bit late, but I think the biggest problem, or one of the biggest problems on fashion, is the fast fashion. So. It's like also all the major brands, they produce every season a new collection. And I think this is a big problem. I think we should stop that in a way.
David,
I think principles are beautiful, but we keep underestimating human nature. We're lepers, we don't change our spots. And as I said, being sexy, desirable, and novelty I think it's just ingrained in our human nature. And to change that is very, very difficult, especially when you're young. And I don't see I don't see it as an easy thing to do, like taxing. You know, if you start taxing these things, you're going to lose the next election, I can promise you. So I keep coming back to human nature. It's unless you change human nature, I mean, that takes education and a new story, tell a new story, I don't think we're going to solve it.
Trisha, maybe to you and David as well. We are talking so much about legislation on a European level and calling for legislative and for standardization. Is discussing about circularity a European thing in a global industry?
Well, being the American here on the panel, I can say it's also required in the US, the legislation. We've been very slow. I think the industry is definitely going to rise to the standard of what is being set in Europe. In the US, we're watching very closely. We do have in the state of Massachusetts that there's mandatory textile recycling. And here, I think they did an excellent job on the education piece. I don't live in Massachusetts, I live in New York. So but when I looked and did the research online, I did think that they put together a nice package. I hope this is an example for other states. The challenge in the US is that it would have to happen state by state or a majority of states, and then it could happen on a national level. The other area to watch is California, which is a very progressive state, and there in Los Angeles, they also have textile recycling. So it's coming on, and they also are having more awareness around also any chemical treatments that are added. So it's bubbling up. And of course, the Fabric Act out of New York is probably the widest known that is still up for approval. The other two that I mentioned in Los Angeles and Massachusetts are approved. So Fabric Act here, I mean, this has been in discussions for over a year. That is a very robust piece of legislation because, and I think it's done the right way. It's addressing carbon footprint, social side, as well as circularity. And I think there, we just need more support to get that through. We lost the major supporter for it in the last election. So more remains to be seen. So legislation has to happen across the Western countries to really make a change here. But I think Europe, it's amazing what's happening, and we need more of it.
And I would like to come back shortly to this discussion about if the consumer is responsible, etc. I think overall the decision is too complicated for the consumer. So we have to drastically reduce the decision for them, make it easy. But the change really has to happen with legislation, minimum requirements. I think minimum requirements are better than taxation, but it could be also combined. That's fine. We see extended producer responsibility in France. Now it's in place in the Netherlands. It will come in Germany and in Sweden and probably in other countries as well, and probably also on the EU level. I think if I look, for example, into the separate waste collection, which will be mandatory from 2025 on. So from 2025 on, each country has to offer separate collection of textiles like it is usual for glass, for paper, etc. today. And if we look into the collection rates today, in Europe, they are between 30 and 35%. Now we are expecting from 2025 on that this will increase to from 2.9 million tons of textiles which we are collecting in Europe today to 5.5 million tons. That's nearly doubling the amount. And I think this is a much bigger effect than we would have if we just would wait for private solutions that we have a few more collection bins, etc. So I think that's very important. And the last thing I think is standards. Standards will make these things easier. We need interoperability between different solutions. And for that, for example, DIN, the German standardization organization, just made a circular economy roadmap where we defined what kind of standards are needed to establish a circular economy. I was in the lead of the textile group there, and we defined 55 standards which are missing. They will be created now in the next 3 years, and then we have a much better field to really establish these technologies.
Yeah, just to close on that, I think I also agree that we cannot put the responsibility to the consumers. And on one hand, we need the legislation, but of course, we also need to educate the consumer on one hand and bring this up, because we've done a workshop with circularity professors and PhD students on labels and material labels and how they would understand what's the real claim about sustainability there, and they couldn't get it. But I think in the end, what's necessary also to provide those claims as an education form from the industry, but also within the industry, is actually the data that we then need to corroborate it, because otherwise we will have problems to argument with and also then comply with the regulations. So that's.
I just wonder, what are we going to do with all these textiles in 2025? Because the Africans don't want them anymore. We can't recycle polyester, it's too expensive in pure form. I know companies are working on cotton polyesters. What are we going to do with all these millions of meters of textiles?
So one of the solutions from Eurotex, for example, is the idea of rehubs to build I think 6 hubs in Europe where they really want to deal with this waste. Obviously, we will need much more of your technology and other technologies for other fiber types to deal with that on recycling side. But I see also that on reuse side, today not, but a few years ago, we had this situation that we were collecting so much that sorters had to give products into recycling because they were rewearable, but they were not marketable anymore. And this problem will increase when we collect more. And that's why we at Circular Fashion, in collaboration with the Technical University of Berlin, are developing a technology which is AI-based sorting, where we take pictures of the garments, and we basically can not only sort based on what product type is it, like is it a t-shirt or is it a trouser and in which quality, and based on the quality it's going to the second-hand shop in Germany, to Eastern Europe or to Africa. Instead, we want to do a sorting which can really be prepare garments for re-commerce, so that it goes back there where new garments are sold, and because that's where the majority of people is and is buying their clothing. So I think every retailer, every brand should sell secondhand next to their other stuff. And I see that there is demand for this, but today the sorters are not able to provide that demand. They cannot provide them feedstock which fits to the clients of that brand. Because if you're entering a store with new stuff, you know which style you find there. And this is not the case for secondhand stores. There you find like all kind of products. And again, I think their technology can be the solution to really create this business, which makes sense in the end.
Muchanita, I think we have to be self-critical. Next time we organize a panel like this, we need to have a retailer up on stage.
I think so, yes. Someone needs to be held responsible.
And some champagne, for sure. Thank you for being with us. I think we should close it at this point. We can go on for hours and hours discussing that problem, I'd say, or not that problem, and the solutions as well. Thank you for staying with us so long. See you all on the party. And thank you, all the panelists and the panelists from the earlier panels, for bringing some light on what the status quo of fashion is at these days. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.